Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I am Ryan Wormeli, joined today by Andrew Erickson and by Tom Strachan. We are recording later than usual, really for all three of us here, as we sit here in the middle of, late May now at this point, getting one step closer to the fantasy football season. We're talking some overvalued players today. Erickson, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm excited. We're getting Tom here from the future. It is tomorrow where Tom is recording. So that's a lot of fun. So I'm hoping that with Tom's ability to be a time traveler, we can get some great insight on some of these overvalued players because Tom exactly knows how it's going to play out.
Tom, we appreciate you going through the difficulty of inventing time travel just to help us out.
You guys will not believe the crazy things that are going to happen to you in the 5 hours that have gone by since it hit midnight in my country till it hits midnight in your country.
Fair warning for everybody who's watching on YouTube. Given the time of day that we're recording this, it's right when the sun sets in front of my window. So there's a chance I get blasted and get some sunburn here, blinded by the light when we're recording later on in this episode. We'll see how quickly we get out of here. Like I said, we're talking about some overvalued players here for 2025. Quick reminder for everybody, all of our 2025 consensus rankings and tiers can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. Each of you pick 6 players here. There's no real designation as far as positions go or anything. Just kind of, we want to get a couple of early round players. We want to get some mid round players. We have one kind of later round player each. Obviously, it's hard to be overvalued when you're going that late, but maybe some sleepers that we're not necessarily buying into. Erickson, you went really wide receiver heavy, I think. Did you do all receivers? Or no, one running back and the rest receivers?
Yeah, I did mostly wide receivers. I did do the Fantasy Pros wide receiver notes, so the wide receiver numbers were kind of fresh in my mind, and that's kind of where I settled here. So yeah, it did include at least one running back. Also, to be fair, Tom did beat me to the sheet, and he took all the good running backs. So a lot of the running backs I actually will agree with when Tom breaks down why they're overvalued.
Tom is definitely more running back heavy in his picks, and he did get to the sheet first. Let's get us started with one of those receivers here, Erickson. And we're going to start off with the guys that are kind of these early round overvalued players. And the way we're defining that is just anybody who's in the top 36 overall of the current half PPR rankings, consensus rankings, that is. And again, fantasypros.com/rankings if you want to follow along with those players.
Yeah, so my first guy is Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver for the Detroit Lions. My wide receiver rankings just got posted up on X, and he is my wide receiver 9, and everybody hates me in the comments because I'm baiting the sun god, but that's just how I feel. So there's a couple reasons why I think that he's overvalued at his current ADP. So he's being drafted 8th overall, so that's where his ECR is. And when you look at some early season projections, I know I've used the Fantasy Pros ones, Mike Clay's projections, which are also very, very good from the industry standard. So his projections have him closer to 16th overall when you're looking at just flex rankings between running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. And I think there's a reason for that. And it's because of the target competition in Detroit, I think, is increasing compared to last year. Last year, we didn't know what Jameson Williams was going to be. We weren't sure if he was like not a bust, but he showed out and he was really productive when he was healthy, when he wasn't suspended, and over the second half of the season, we saw Amon-Ra St. Brown's target share dip from 27% to 23% over the final 7 games as Jameson Williams and Sam Laporta were more involved in the offense. They were spreading the ball out a lot more than just focusing on the sun god. And there's only one game really where St. Brown just completely dominated the targets over Jameson Williams, which was that 18-target game against Buffalo Bills in Week 15. If you remove that from the equation, their target share is nearly identical in all the other games. You know, one week it's Jameson, the other week it's Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, you can't just take away that one game. It happened, so I'm not trying to discredit Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I'm just pointing out the fact that the targets, I think, are going to be much closer in 2025 than they were in 2024, especially when you consider it's a new offensive coordinator coming in. We are so excited about finding that slot receiver for the Chicago Bears, but we're not thinking about, well, what does that have to affect on the Lions offense in 2025? Is it as centered around the sun god as it's been without Ben Johnson calling the shots as the OC? So those are some of the reasons why I just think that he's a little bit overvalued. Will he still finish as a wide receiver 1, most likely without any type of injury, but I think he might actually be more in the lower tier of wide receiver 10 to 12 as opposed to in that top 8 overall players at receiver and running back.
Tom, what do you think about this one? For me, I feel like if I'm making Amon-Ra my pick in the first round, I don't know that I'm feeling super great about it. Like, just given like Ben Johnson not being there, some of the targets of Erickson's laying out. if he was like an early second round pick, I would still be like pretty thrilled about that, I think. But I don't think he's going to get there in most drafts. How are you approaching St. Brown? Do you agree that he's overvalued right now?
I'm not really there. I think that like I'm not against Amon-Ra as much as Andrew and yourself maybe. I'm more out on JMO. Jameson Williams feels so much more volatile, and the price that you've got to pay for him, like 35 picks later than Amon-Ra, that just feels too expensive. Like I look at JMO, and for all that he closed the gap last year, he only had 2 games over a 22% target share. Meanwhile, you've got Amon-Ra who had 10 games over 18 PPR points in 2024. His touchdowns have grown in each of his 4 seasons in the NFL, 10 the previous year, 12 last year. And while we don't want to count on touchdown production year to year, particularly when there's a new offensive coordinator, I just think it shows that his role is fairly established. He had over 60 receptions more than Sam Laporta and JMO last year. Like, there's just too much reliability in what we've seen from Amon-Ra for me to be fading him. I get what Andrew's saying, but like I think I'm still not quite ready to fade him at this point.
Erickson, the next 8 names in the overall half PPR rankings after Amon-Ra are Malik Neighbors, Ashton Genty, Nico Collins, Brian Thomas Jr., Derrick Henry, Devon Achane, Brock Bowers, and Christian McCaffrey. Do you want any of those guys? Do you want all those players ahead of St. Brown, or are there some that you would still take Amon-Ra ahead of?
I'd have to pull my exact rankings to give you the rundown. I mean, I think that it's, again, you listed off the next 8 guys.
Yeah.
I think that it's probably I'm taking mostly all those guys over. I mean, he's my wide receiver 9, like I said, so I'd have to look exactly at my rankings. But for the most part, I mean, look, I'm just not going to draft Amon-Ra St. Brown this year. And again, he's a sun god. I could get totally burned and totally cooked by him, as he's done year after year. But I just think that the price is more about last year not projecting. I mean, I just think Jameson Williams is going to be a thing. Like, this guy was a first-round pick. He's fully healthy. The suspensions are all behind him. And the OC, the first thing he says in the offseason this year, breakout year for Jameson Williams. And I'm thinking, wait, didn't we just have this happen last year? So if he takes another step forward, then I think that's going to eat into the sun god. So
I mean, I think it's also fair to just be worried in the sense of, like, Jared Goff has never been good when he didn't have an elite play caller. And I think he is a better quarterback now than he was early on in his career. Like, I'm not here to fade Goff, but it's just enough for me to say, well, maybe I look elsewhere than the guy who's been his top target, but may not even be his clear-cut top target anymore. So I think it's a fair pick, even though I'm not surprised people strongly disagreed with you posting.
Oh, I mean, people are always going to disagree when you're picking guys in the first round, right? But
yeah.
Again, not everyone's getting a hit, and obviously when guys get hurt, they obviously don't live up to their ADP.
Yeah. Tom, let's go to your first pick, a running back here.
Yeah, and it's Jonathan Taylor. A lot of this, it just comes back to an overall confidence level in the Colts. Like this time last year, I felt quite okay drafting Anthony Richardson. I felt quite okay drafting Josh Downs. And I felt okay about the Colts offense in general. And they were just a complete disappointment, despite the fact that they had a very soft division. I think it wouldn't be surprising to see the division improve slightly this year if that takes them out of more neutral scripts where they're able to run the ball and control things a bit. Then that could be a slight ding on Jonathan Taylor. This offense last year wasn't a good offense. 14th in run offense DVOA, 23rd in pass offense DVOA. 42% of Jonathan Taylor's points came in 3 performances last year. 2 of those 3 were in week 16 and 17. So if you had Jonathan Taylor and you made it to the semifinals or the finals of any fantasy tournament, then you were in good stead. But I just don't think that you were making it there with Jonathan Taylor very often. He was RB14 or worse in 7 of 13 games last year, currently being drafted as the RB10. I just think that's too steep of a price to pay for him. Like, when you look back at how he was actually performing for the vast majority of last season, weeks 1 to 13, ranked 3rd among all running backs with 100 plus carries and stuffed run rate. Now, not all of that is always on the running back, but it didn't feel overly impressive until he had those massive blow-up weeks at the end. And look, I also just really like DJ Giddens in the draft, so there's just a number of factors that for me, I've got Jonathan Taylor down at RB15, and if he fell a few spots, I'd start to feel a lot more comfortable about it.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. A lot of the names that you guys put into the sheet, I am largely agreeing with. This is one where I'm not saying I'm above consensus on Taylor, but I think I'm comfortable with where he's going. Like, if I can get him in the mid to late second round, he's currently the 20th overall player, so maybe he's a little high at running back, but as far as the overall like names in that range, I think I'd be comfortable with that, especially if I'm getting a really strong receiver like in the middle of round 1. I think I'd be okay with Taylor in round 2. Erickson, I'm curious what you think about this one.
Yeah, so I'm more in line I have him ranked where ECR has him ranked. So I kind of agree with you, Worm, where I'm comfortable taking him, but as Tom outlines the potential flaws, it just seems like there's a lot that could drag Jonathan Taylor down than for us to get, we're really excited about him. Like, I think he goes similar to Bucky Irving. I know Derek DeBrow is really high on Bucky Irving. I mean, we're excited about drafting Bucky Irving, right? He's a second-year guy, going to take this massive leap. We don't care about Rashad White. But then Jonathan Taylor, he's trying to hold on to what he could do in this offense where we have concerns about the offense. Every other Colts wide receiver, you can get a cheap discount, but you don't really get a massive discount with Jonathan Taylor despite all of the question marks about who this is going to be the starting quarterback. What's the offensive line going to look like now that they've traded or they got rid of half their interior and is now in Minnesota? I know we talked about this on the running back show. Is Jonathan Taylor maxed out at RB10? Is that his ceiling finish? Because we know he doesn't really catch passes, so that's an issue when it comes to half PPR and PPR formats. And if the offense struggles or is in a below average scoring unit, well, where's the red zone opportunities for Jonathan Taylor? And so, yes, I think that maybe he can finish where he's being drafted, but it feels like it's closer to his potential ceiling with all the issues that Tom outlined, and that's kind of why I could see him being overvalued here. And so, yeah, that's kind of my take on it.
That's fair. I think I just don't really like the back half of the second round this year very much. So that's why I'm comfortable with Taylor being. But I'm like looking at the names. He's sandwiched between Jacobs and Bucky Irving. I don't think that's unreasonable. I do like Ladd McConkey, who's right after those guys. Then there's like Trey McBride. I don't know if I'm taking a tight end early if it's not Brock Bowers. Josh Allen, I'm not going to be the guy taking the QB in the second round. Kyren Williams, we're going to talk about later on the show. Lamar, like JSN is a mid-second round pick. I like him. There's just a lot of names where I'm like, you know what, I'm okay just like taking a swing on Jonathan Taylor here. What round, not where is he ranked, Tom, amongst running backs for you, but where in the draft are you comfortable taking Taylor in terms of like late second, early third? Is that what you're hoping to do?
Yeah, so if I could get him on the 2-3 turn, like if I could pair him with Jamar Chase or, that sort of 102 slot, I think that's completely fine if I'm getting him there. Because as you say, as you start to get towards the third round, there's quite a few more question marks than perhaps there was last year. If I could pair him, again, like with CeeDee Lamb, I'd be okay with it. I just need to feel really secure in my first round pick. And towards the back half of the first rounds at the minute, there are some guys that we have question marks. I'm okay with Amon-Ra St. Brown, but you look at Malik Neighbors and you're talking about QB issues. You talk about Ashton Genty, and we are still talking about a rookie, Puka Nacua, and you can question Matthew Stafford. So really, I'd like to push him up to those first-round talents that I feel a bit more secure about to be willing to take a chance on Jonathan Taylor because of the reasons I mentioned.
One guy that we are not saying is overvalued today is Nico Collins. And if you want a chance to win a signed Nico Collins Texans jersey for free, courtesy of our friends at pristineauction.com, all you have to do is subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel right now. Drop a comment below on any video, and that is it. We'll be announcing a winner right here on the channel, so make sure to turn on those notifications so you can know when new videos are up and to claim your prize. We've got one more each of the early round overvalued players. Erickson, who you got?
Tyreek Hill, wide receiver for the Miami Dolphins. I want no part of Tyreek Hill. I think that he is vastly overrated here as a top 36 overall player. Last year, he was wide receiver 33 in points per game. And when Tua was healthy, he was still just wide receiver 18 in points per game. So we saw the sharp decline in terms of efficiency. His yards per route run plummeted to 1.75, which was nearly half of his 2023 mark now. He was coming off a monster number, so even 1.75 is really not that bad. But just compared to what he was doing before in this offense, it's a pretty steep, it's eye-opening of how badly things got for him, even when Tua was still in the games that Tua played. Because, again, we all know that Miami had a ton of quarterback issues, and Jaylen Waddle also suffered a lot of lack of production because of it. But I just think there's so many red flags. Receivers, I don't think, get better with age. We saw this with Cooper Kupp, right? He starts to fall off a little bit. Michael Thomas, he starts to fall off a little bit. Now, those guys, a little bit more injury related, but still, Tyreek Hill, a guy that's always relied on, I'm the fastest guy on the field. Well, if he's starting to lose a step here or there, I think that starts to really matter. He's going to be 31 years old this year. We've already seen some of the decline when it comes to the efficiency numbers. We had him dealing with this wrist injury all last year. Is that going to have a lingering effect on him as he goes into 2025? And then you have where does he stand in Miami's future plans? Like, what is Miami doing? Is Miami a potential dumpster fire this year on offense where Tyreek Hill even on the roster? Now, that's ultimately going to be the reason why we get cooked here, because Tyreek Hill's going to end up going back to the Chiefs and he's going to be amazing, and that's why he's going to be a hit. But right now, drafting him as a top 36 overall player, I just want no part of drafting Tyreek Hill.
He wasn't going in the as late as he is now a year ago, but everything you just laid out is everything I said a year ago about why I was fading Tyreek Hill. Into his 30s now, a guy who relies on speed. I'm not confident in Tua staying healthy, and I know it wasn't entirely Hill's fault that I ended up being kind of correct on fading him, but it was correct, and a lot of those same reasons still exist. I mean, he had 130 yards in week 1. Last year was his best week of the entire season. From week 2 on, he only topped 100 receiving yards once last year. Like, it was not, and again, quarterback issues, of course, wrist issues, of course, but you don't get healthier with age. You don't get faster with age. And the quarterback staying healthy is going to be a concern as long as Tua is the starting quarterback, as disappointing as that is. So this might be the one I most agree with either of you on this entire episode. I could not be more in lockstep with you, Erickson, on Tyreek Hill. There is no chance I'll be drafting him in any third round this year. Tom, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm right there with you guys. This was such an easy one because the volume just wasn't there last year. You talked about like the yardage wasn't there, but you only had 2 games where he had more than 7 receptions. Tyreek Hill used to earn targets at such a high rate. The Dolphins don't seem to need him in the same way that they used to. Maybe that changes if Jonnu Smith gets traded and all of a sudden they don't have that check down outlet that they seem to use Jonnu Smith for so much last year. But his yards per reception last year was only the second time it's been below 12 in his entire career. His yards after the catch per reception was by far a career worst at 3.6, joint lowest touchdown output of his career. And I just think that what we're seeing is a wide receiver in decline, like Andrew said. Dwayne McFarland of Fantasy Life has done some fantastic research into wide receivers going off the cliff edge at age 31, and I just think that Tyreek Hill is not going to be the same guy we ever saw him be a couple of years ago. And for me, I've got him down right around player 35, I think, in my rankings, and I could really see myself dropping him more and bringing Jaylen Waddle up.
I'm looking at some of these other receiver names that are currently ranked after Tyreek Hill. Terry McLaurin, I would rather have him. Garrett Wilson, I'd rather have him. Devontae Adams, I would rather have him. Even getting further down, I might rather just take the upside shot on Marvin Harrison Jr. than Tyreek Hill, even coming off of last year. Like, I will not be drafting Tyreek unless his price goes way down. I think just based on the name value, that's not going to happen.
Well, would you rather have him or Jaylen Waddle?
I would rather have Waddle. Particularly at the cost it will take to get him, but I would.
Well, I mean, like, imagine if Hill falls, and then you're looking at the board, it's Hill and Waddle as the top 2 guys. Who are you going to click?
I think I will be ranking Tyreek higher than Waddle in my like.
That's not what I asked you. Who are you going to click, Worm? Who are you going to click?
I would probably click Waddle, honestly.
Yes.
I'm willing to plant my flag on that take. Like, I think Waddle will be better than Hill this season.
The line for me when I was looking how far, if I was taking ADP out of it, how far would I drop Hill? It comes at Jameson Williams, right between Devonta Smith and Jameson Williams. That's the volatility that I think that we're going to end up on, and that's the kind of headache that it gives me. And right now I'm just in a holding pattern and just kind of ignoring it because the ADP is still high, but any reason I have to drop him and it'll be plummeting.
We agree too emphatically on this, so I'm sure we're going to get burned. But we are definitely all in lockstep on Tyreek Hill. Tom, who's your last early round overvalued player?
Yeah, and it's Kyren Williams, and I take no joy in this because Kyren Williams last year, when people were fading him, I was very much in on him. It's the second straight year that Rams drafted a rookie, which is probably a smart thing to be doing and investing draft capital into the position, but it's also not a ringing endorsement on Kyren Williams. Last year, he averaged 81 rushing yards per game in 2024. That was 4th among running backs. But he also fumbled the ball 3 times, ranked 35th in Duke rate amongst running backs with 100-plus carries. And I think what we're going to see is a slight shift away from the running game with the addition of Devontae Adams. Like, Puka Nacua, for all his brilliance, isn't a great touchdown scorer. He's only combined across the last 2 seasons to score 9 touchdowns. Cooper Kupp's regression was massively clear. Whereas Devontae Adams is still a really good red zone player. I think that we're going to see some excellent connection between him and Matthew Stafford. And if that digs into Kyren Williams' touchdown upside, then Kyren Williams just can't really afford that. Like, Stafford, wasn't a great fantasy option last year because he wasn't throwing touchdowns. He only threw more than one touchdown. I think he failed to throw for more than one touchdown in 10 of his 16 games. And I think the Rams want to get that passing game going more. And if that dings Kyren at the same time that we've got these two young players behind him, and he's also slightly inefficient, I just can't build myself an argument on why I should be drafting Kyren Williams as he slips into what we know is the running back dead zone, which looks more dead this year than it did last year.
The only reason I'm afraid to fade Kyren Williams is because I faded him a year ago and it burned me, and I am just emotionally not ready to go through that again. But I agree with this pick, and I was sitting here a year ago saying I'm not taking Kyren Williams where he's going, and he's going a little later this year, but still, high, and I find myself thinking all the things I did a year ago, except for I had this year where it burned me. So, Erickson, what do you make of Kyren Williams?
Well, Worm, the thing is, Tom is a person that's coming to the table saying he drafted Kyren last year, and he's like, no, like the ride is over. Because I faded Kyren too, and I was totally wrong. But this year, no. Now even the supporters of Kyren are now fading Kyren Williams. So I think that's a good thing to bring up because I think that the argument is just better and stronger this year. Now there's two potential rookie running backs two running backs behind Kyren that we could see potentially taking on a larger role. A lot of the coach speak this offseason has been about Sean McVay duplicating what Liam Cohen did in Tampa Bay, where they were using up to 3 running backs in games. It wasn't just one guy. I know we've also made the argument about fading Saquon Barkley when it comes to the volume and touches that he saw last year. Well, right behind him was Kyren Williams. So basically, he was second in touches and he was actually first in RB snap share. But when you look at the running backs that face planted the biggest in 2024, 3 of those guys were Christian McCaffrey, Travis Etienne, Rashad White. What do they all have in common? They ranked 1, 2, and 3 in terms of total touches the year before. So just chasing the high of that volume monster. And when Tom pointed out, the efficiency wasn't there for him last year. Like he showed signs of he's not breaking as many tackles. He's not getting as many yards after contact. You know who he actually looked like a lot when it came to his efficiency as a rusher? Najee Harris. That's what he looked like a lot when you just look at some of those advanced metrics. And nobody is staking their claim for you got to get Najee Harris. He's going to be a great running back that you're going to build your offense around. So I think that Kyren projects. Again, we like him because of the projection. If you look at some of the projections on the site, he's 10th in projection. So that's why I see you're afraid where I'm just like, oh man, like what if Sean McVay just does it again? He just gives him all the touches. But if he doesn't, then Kyren is going to be a bust and he's going to kill your lineup. So I'm with Tom here, much lower on Kyren. I know it feels like Groundhog Day, just doing the same thing over and over again, but I think this time it's going to work out.
Let's go to our mid-round mistakes. This is kind of guys that are in rounds 4 to 8 overall, so that's roughly the range we're looking for here. Erickson, who do you think is overvalued in this range?
I'm going to go with DJ Moore, wide receiver for the Chicago Bears. Last year, I don't need to get too in the weeds with it because we know the Bears offense was really dysfunctional, but he was wide receiver 16 overall, wide receiver 32 in points per game, really buoyed by a lot of that volume, especially at the end of the year where he took on this very low average depth of target, was basically the bubble screen king, getting a ton of receptions, but not really much yardage. Again, career low yards per route run, 25% bust rate, that tied for the 3rd worst among wide receivers that finished inside the top 24. And I have legitimate questions about how he fits into this new offense with Ben Johnson. So he is right now drafted as the Bears wide receiver 1, but I just think that the value proposition of just betting on, DJ Moore's going to continue to just be the wide receiver 1 when I don't think it's a going crazy saying that is DJ Moore like a true alpha number 1 wide receiver? I don't really think I would describe that as his game. Like he's a good, very good wide receiver and he popped in a big way with Justin Fields, but a lot of that in that season was him having a couple monster games here and there, creating yards after the catch, taking advantage of bad defenses. And yes, he can be a productive player. So I'm not ready to call DJ Moore a total bust, which is why I felt he was more overvalued because when I look at the Bears roster, I feel like I like the value propositions on a Rome Odunze, on a Luther Burden, just much later in the draft, betting on, well, what if Ben Johnson decides, no, this is the guy I want to build my offense through. When you look at DJ Moore, outside that wide receiver 6 finish in 2023, he's never finished inside the top 15 wide receivers in any other season that he's played and been healthy for. So if I fade him, the worst thing is probably, okay, he'll be a top 15 or he'll be right at the cusp of mid-range fantasy wide receiver too. Like I'm okay skipping on that Whereas if I'm right about Odunze or Luther Burden hitting as the new wide receiver one in this offense, well, that's going to be a league-winning pick versus DJ Moore, where I feel like maybe at best, like I'm hitting a double.
I feel like for a guy who has not been worse than wide receiver 22 in any year since his rookie season in 2018, that the floor is low for DJ Moore, despite the fact that he has had a very high floor in the past. Now, a lot of that is not missing games. Obviously, that's overall finish, not weekly per game finish, that number. And I think to that point, the fact that last year he did not have 100 catches, he did not reach 1,000 yards, excuse me, and he only had 6 receiving touchdowns. His yards per reception was under 10 for the first time in his career, and he still finished wide receiver 16. I think that says more about the state of the position last season than it does about DJ Moore, being a top 16 receiver in terms of fantasy value he gave to your team. And I agree with you. I think there's every chance. I'm huge on Rome Odunze. I think there's every chance he could, take a step forward and be the alpha in this offense. I like Luther Burden. We see it all the time when there's a new coach in town. If it's not a guy that they drafted, those guys tend to fall off, whether we agree with that decision or not. I'm surprised DJ Moore is, and again, this is kind of weird to say for a guy who has had a high floor in terms of his overall finishes for several years, but I'm surprised that he is even ranked as high as he is, truthfully.
I also think, too, the chemistry with Caleb Williams just never, it seemed like DJ Moore was an advocate for Fields. That seemed like that was a legitimate thing, and that's when he was better. He was better with Justin Fields than Caleb Williams. Again, Caleb Williams was a rookie and is a little bit different, but is that chemistry there? Who's to say Caleb's not going to lean more on Odunze, lean more on Luther Burden? So for those reasons, I like the value more with these other Bears players. Tom, I'm not sure how you feel.
Yeah, I'm kind of neutral on DJ Moore. I think the price, on Underdog Best Ball, he's going at wide receiver 23, which kind of feels quite palatable to me for the reasons that Worm laid out. This is a guy who doesn't tend to fail spectacularly. But the point you make, Andrew, about the lack of chemistry with Caleb Williams definitely feels noteworthy. It felt like Keenan Allen had slightly better chemistry last year, and he was getting those kind of layups to the slot that made it so much easier for Keenan Allen to produce down the stretch. Rome Odunze didn't do much, but obviously the potential is massive there. Luther Burden, quite volatile as a prospect, and I do like Colston Loveland. He was my tight end one going into the draft. But I still think that what we get out of DJ Moore is probably a player who's going to be playing in 2 wide receiver sets. And if he's on the field, I think that he's got a good chance to still earn enough targets to be relevant. I mean, last year he finished 9th among wide receiver in targets. And he's in a range at the minute between Travis Hunter and Ted McMillan, where I think it's quite easy to say, okay, can I see this veteran DJ Moore having a better season than Travis Hunter and Ted McMillan? And it's quite easy to tell yourself a story there that the veteran ends up doing better. If you want to shoot for upside, then by all means go with the rookies who undeniably have that unknown. But I think I'm just kind of okay with it. He's not a player that I'd want on every roster I draft this offseason, but he's not a player that I'm marking way down in my rankings so that I don't see him.
Tom, let's stick with you for your next pick.
Yeah, so my next pick is another running back. I mean, it's probably not a surprise for somebody who's a big 0 RB guy, but James Cook is somebody that I'm really struggling with. The contract issues continuing to linger. This is a Bills team that went into the offseason and was so proactive in re-signing players who they wanted to get onto better contracts. Cook coming off leading all players in touchdowns scored last year, 17. That should be a player that a team really wants to sign, but it just doesn't seem like the Bills are willing to give him the kind of money that he wants. He's been quite vocal about wanting a good high-end deal. And Cook, that season, it feels like quite an outlier. He only had 9 touchdowns in the previous 2 seasons combined. He was massively reliant on those touchdowns for his scoring last year. 39% of his fantasy points came from touchdowns. He ranked 24th among running backs in total scrimmage yards. So there were games where if he wasn't getting a touchdown, then he wasn't getting you the kind of points that you needed to be able to compete with the top-end running backs. And this offense, the Bills, they just nullify any kind of star factor outside of Josh Allen. Josh Allen is a superstar, and then trying to bet on any of the players in the Bills offense to have consistent fantasy output it's really difficult because there'll just be weeks where it's one guy, weeks where it's another. And last year, James Cook got there 3 touchdowns, and that's not something that I would necessarily want to bet on this year.
Yeah, Cook and Erickson, I'm curious what you think about this. I'm not at the point in my fantasy playing career where I am just blanket auto out on anybody who is like holding out during the offseason. And obviously there's still time for the contract stuff to get resolved. It's still only May. But I'm not far off from that thought. I just feel like it always burns you. There's always a slow start. And I just don't want to, especially this early in the draft where you need to be drafting Cook coming off of his year last year. I just don't want to be in that business of a guy who,
especially
might have
running
a slow
backs
start like that. Yeah, I to me it's very easy to fade given that contract situation. Which again, Erickson, there is still time for that to get fixed.
Yeah, but it's still kind of in the back of your head where last year he shows out, he scores all these touchdowns, and then he wants to get paid. He's not going to score 19 touchdowns again. Like that's very unlikely that he's going to score that many. Now, it's more like it's going to hit that average. So if he plays the full season, he'll probably end up being somewhere in the double digits, 8 to 9 to 10 touchdowns. I think is probably a safe bet for him to make, kind of breaking the middle between the last 2 seasons. And so I'm like more in line with James Cook in terms of ECR, but I would agree with, I don't necessarily love taking the running backs in this kind of range. Like I have question marks, but like Breece Hall kind of goes in that range. Again, Kyren goes in there. I would take James Cook over Kyren. So I'm not like that far out on Cook where I'd be teaching Kyren over him. But I think that the usage point is a really good thing to bring up where he was not getting there because of the usage. I mean, average 14.1 touches per game. He's playing under 50% of the snaps, RB26, and expected fantasy points per game. And we know the touchdowns are probably going to come down. Like he's probably just not going to score that many. So I think it's a case of you should have drafted James Cook last year, and if you didn't, don't get caught. Don't chase it, right? Just be like, all right, I lost, take the L, and kind of move on, and just like, hey, we got to figure out who could be this year's James Cook. Like, I think that's kind of like the lesson here. It's like, don't chase James Cook's season from last year. Try to find who can be this year's James Cook, who can cash in on this massive touchdown regression. So, but I will say with Cook, so we have a 28 game sample size of him in Joe Brady's offense, basically since he took over, I think at the second half, I don't remember, it's like 2.5 years ago, somewhere along those lines, but average 15.5 fantasy points per game since that point over that 28 games. And that's good low-end fantasy RB1 production. So I think if he stays healthy, shows up, he's going to end up being a low-end RB1. Not the worst pick, but I think that we could do better.
These aren't the only 3 running back names in this tier, but I want to ask about these 3. Erickson, who would you rather draft? And I'm going to ask you the same question, Tom, after Erickson. Who would you rather draft out of Breece Hall, James Cook, Kenneth Walker?
Actually, I want Tom to go first.
Okay, Tom, you can go first.
Yeah, so I mean, I've got Breece Hall as my 32nd player overall, James Cook 41st, and then Kenneth Walker down at 45. So it's Breece Hall for me. I don't feel particularly good about any of those guys, and I generally just prefer the wide receivers in this tier. But yeah, I mean, we'll get to one of those in a bit.
Erickson, if it helps, I'll go before you. I would go Breece Hall, then Walker, then Cook for me.
So I have it ranked Hall, Cook, and then Walker, so the same as Tom, but okay. I don't know if it's Deebo is in my ear about Ken Walker. But
that's exactly why I said Walker.
But every time I look at Walker, I'm like, man, I know that I just feel so confident that when he is healthy, playing in this offense for Seattle, that he's going to be a smash. I feel very confident about that with Ken Walker.
Well, let me ask you this: DJ Moore or Kenneth Walker, because they are very close.
I would take Ken Walker. I would take Ken Walker.
Yeah,
I definitely agree with that too. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to Erickson, your next receiver.
I know Tom's gonna hate this one, so that's why I had to make sure I put it on the list. So Devonta Smith for me for the wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles, and this one I feel like I have to. I'm bringing it up every year with Devonta Smith, where I want to recognize that he's a really good real life wide receiver, but is he always the best fantasy option? So last year, 8 games with both A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert active in the lineup, he averaged 8.3 fantasy points per game. That was wide receiver 51, basically looking at the season-long averages. But when one of those guys missed time, he averaged almost 15 points per game, which was fantasy wide receiver 1. So for me with Devonta Smith, it's really about what your roster looks like. And because when those other guys are healthy, like he doesn't produce. He's not putting up numbers where you can even feel good about putting him in your starting lineup. But the upside is there. So when a guy misses time, okay, he smashes. But I'm not so sure that where I have to draft Devonta Smith, I want to make a bet on injury contingency where, okay, now I got to just bank on one of these guys missing and then I'm locked and loaded to go. So I recognize, and that's why I put Smith in here as this overvalued conversation, not as a bust, because just look at his career. There's no bust finishes in his career. Like, he's been a really solid receiver in fantasy since he entered the NFL. But I get concerned when he starts to steam up as a wide receiver 2 with 2 other strong target earners on his team and an offense that really likes to run the football a ton. So those are the reasons why Devonta Smith, I just am hesitant to draft where he ends up going in a lot of these fantasy drafts.
There's also a difference I just want to say, because you mentioned the kind of the bust factor. This episode isn't busts, right?
Correct.
That can be kind of part of the conversation, but it's overvalued players. And some players who are high floor can still be overvalued because we are not confident in the ceiling or because we think the floor isn't as high as we thought. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be a bust and completely tank your season. It's just they're not going to be worth it where they're going.
Yeah, so that's kind of the point I'm just trying to make with Smith is I think that, again, at the end of the day, he's probably going to end up finishing somewhere in the 30, 35 range at worst. But if these guys don't miss games after they missed games last year, then he's going to be a dead part of your roster that you can't start confidently. And I think in best ball, it's a little bit different. I think that he's a better best ball option because of the upside that he can offer on a week-to-week basis if one of these guys misses. But there's a lot of guys, a lot of receivers that I think I can get still later where you're getting some similar contingency upside if there's an injury that just don't cost as much.
What do you think about this one, Tom? I know Erickson kind of predicted you were not going to agree with it.
Yeah, I mean, I love the Slim Reaper. Like, he's such a fun player to watch, such a good receiver, and I don't want to fade Devonta Smith. Like, last year was the first season in the NFL where he's had less than 100 targets. His stats have been pretty much stable year to year, yards per target, yards per game, touchdowns, year to year. It's all fairly consistent. And wide receiver 29 on underdog ADP, I know at the minute he is. Like, that feels fine to me. He's at 8 20-plus point games over the last 2 years. And I think it kind of goes back to what Erickson touched on about how your roster looks. If you're drafting Devonta Smith as your wide receiver 2, that's probably a lot more of a hard sell. But if I can get him as my wide receiver 3 or even my wide receiver 4, then I'd feel a lot more comfortable with it.
It is officially the best time of year for Hoops fans. Playoff drama, buzzer beaters, all the chaos we live for. And if you're done just watching and ready to actually win some cash, you got to check out Pick 6 from DraftKings. Nobody's dropping better payouts than Pick 6. Hit 6 picks, and that's 25 times your cash. And if you beat your competition, you could be looking at a 500 times bag in your pocket. It's super simple. Select your picks, track your score, and go for those big-time prizes. No gimmicks, just straight up fun. Pick 6 is live in most states like Missouri, California, Texas, Georgia, and plenty more. So yeah, don't settle for weak payouts. Make your picks with Pick 6 and let your basketball brain pay off. New to DraftKings Pick 6, new customers toss in just $5 on your first entry, and you'll get $50 in bonus picks instantly. The playoffs are on, so why not take a shot at making a little money while you're watching? Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app right now and use code FANTASYPROS. That's code FANTASYPROS to play $5 and get $50 in bonus picks. Better payouts, bigger wins, only on Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Tom, let's go to your next overvalued player.
And it hurts me to do this, but it's Deebo Samuel, a guy that I was ahead of consensus on all last year. I thought he was going to get the perfect run out when Brandon Ayuk got injured. It was all set up for him, and he flopped in a massive way. Like, he just looked completely out of juice. He had the lowest receiving success rate of his career by far. He'd never been below 47% previously, 40% last year. Rushing yards before contact, that dropped from 3.8 yards down to 1.6. Now, obviously, he's on a new offense with the Commanders. They didn't spend that much on him. It was only a 5th-round pick. He's got no guaranteed money going beyond this year. He ranked 77th in targets per route run, so he wasn't really earning them at a high rate. And that was even with Brandon Ayuk off the field. He was 51st among wide receivers in first read rate. The 49ers seemed to know that he didn't quite have it last year, and Brock Purdy seemed to know he didn't quite have it last year and just wasn't targeting him that much. And I think that this offense with the Commanders is going to continue to run through Terry McLaurin. I've got much more faith in him, and I just don't really want to be drafting Deebo Samuel. Like, I'd probably put him around about round 7 before I'd feel comfortable on him.
This is another very strong agree by me. I promise you, if he stays in this range, I will be ranking him below consensus come end of August. I think this is too high, and pretty much for all the reasons you just said, I don't need to rehash them. I really strongly agree with Tom on this one. Erickson, where do you have Deebo Samuel?
Ranked very, very low. So someone that I'm also not interested in Deebo Samuel. It's fun, if you look at the Fantasy Pros ECR rankings, it has a cool tool and filter where you can see how often a player beat their weekly projection. So in 15 games that he played with the projection where he had fantasy points, he went over his projection 3 times. 20% of his games, he exceeded expectations before the game started. So, yes, there's no sugarcoating. He was terrible last year. I know that he did deal with a bunch of injuries. I know that he had I believe it was pneumonia that he was dealing with. So,
yep.
So I think that those backing Deebo will come to the argument with, well, he's banged up. He was playing through illness. It's like, okay. And Terry McLaurin is also again, we mentioned the holdout. Terry McLaurin is currently also holding out for a new contract. So if there's an issue where Terry McLaurin gets banged up or something and he pulls his hamstring and then Deebo is the default number 1, I could see a scenario where this maybe looks bad in the beginning of the season. But Worm, I'm telling you right now, the first guy I'm putting on the trade high show, sell high, after Deebo scores an 80-yard touchdown, is he's the number 1 guy. I'm going right to the sheet the minute that he scores a long touchdown with his yards after the catch in week 1, and he's going to be a sell high for me because we've seen, he doesn't last. He's not going to play all 17 games. He gets hurt all the time. He's 29 years old, and I guess I'm not as optimistic about Cliff Kingsbury just using him in this super dynamic way where didn't Cliff Kingsbury have Rondale Moore for the longest time, and we never got any creative usage out of that type of explosive player, running back, wide receiver hybrid? I mean, it took us long enough to get McLaurin away from just lining up on one side of the field. Yeah. It took us the entire season. So just projecting Deebo to have this crazy, unique running back, wide receiver role, I think is just being a little bit too optimistic. So even if Deebo makes me look bad for the first month while he's healthy, I think you're going to be better off when the season comes down to the fantasy playoffs.
That's the exact point I was going to make when I first saw this name on the sheet is I don't he outside of the 2021 season, Deebo Samuel has never had 900 receiving yards in a season. He's never had double-digit receiving touchdowns. The elite, awesome seasons have been driven by these rushing touchdowns and just the rushing usage. In no way, shape, or form do I trust the Commanders to do that. I still don't think Cliff Kingsbury is a very good offensive coach. I think he got an incredible rookie quarterback who covered up a lot of Kingsbury's warts. I follow a lot of Commanders fans on Twitter, and a lot of them were talking about we really need him to not get poached for a head coaching job. And I was like, I think you can do a lot better than Cliff Kingsbury. You should hope that somebody, saves you from that mess and allows you to make a better hire. Because I don't think he's the worst offensive coordinator in football, but I don't think he's very good. I don't think his stuff is very inspired or creative. And Deebo Samuel, I think to be an awesome fantasy asset, needs an inspired and creative play caller. And I just don't think that, even setting aside injury risks and another year older and, coming off this down season. So, I am not in on Samuel in Washington, and I'm not in on him in fantasy. Erickson, next mid-round mistake.
Jordan Addison, wide receiver for the Minnesota Vikings. Looking at Addison's finish last year, so he scored 8 of his 9 touchdowns after week 9. So before that, when he wasn't scoring any touchdowns, he was under 9 fantasy points per game, so well outside the wide receiver 3 range. When you look at his target share in the Vikings offense, even when TJ Hawkinson wasn't part of the offense, he never topped a 20% target share on the year. I was expecting going back to see, okay, his target share was probably north of 20%, start the year with no Hawkinson. That wasn't the case. His target share never crested more than 20% when all these guys were healthy at any point. And now you're throwing in a brand new quarterback. Again, we expect the system in Minnesota to be great. It's always been great with the current head coach in place there. But it's still a projection. And I guess for me, I also think the Vikings, I think they want to run the ball a little bit more, just given the fact that they're having a brand new quarterback who's never played in the NFL, coming off a major knee injury, and they just bolstered up that interior offensive line. They traded for Jordan Mason. They have Aaron Jones. Why not give your young quarterback a really solid run game, play bully ball a little bit to make his life easier, not put everything on his shoulders? So if that means Addison is now the wide receiver, basically, 2A or 2B option in the passing game with an offense that isn't leading the league in terms of passing yards and pass rate over expectation, well, then I don't think he's going to pay off, especially with both of his seasons, he scored a ton of touchdowns. So you have to win with a lot of efficiency with Jordan Addison. Not to say he's a bad player. I don't think that he's a bad player, but just looking at the optics of the situation, I could see him underwhelming. And for him to sneak into the top 24 3 years in a row, also considering that he may get suspended at some point for the DUI that happened in 2024. So that still hasn't been totally finalized, but I think at this point, there's more information. There's more, smoke around Addison probably missing games this year than Rashee Rice. So that's something to also kind of pay attention to, where if he's going to miss 1 to 3 games, it's another reason why, I don't feel like dealing with potentially a number 3 target with a brand new quarterback. So for me, that's why Addison is someone that I think is a little bit overvalued.
Yeah, Addison is really interesting because I do kind of think, so the last 2 years he's been around 100 targets, around 65-ish receptions, and around 900 receiving yards. I think all 3 of those are very possible to repeat again for a third straight year, but it's the touchdowns. 10 in year 1, 9 in year 2. That's where he has to be really efficient again, like you said, Erickson. He also had a rushing touchdown last year, so a total of 10 in both years. And that's where you get a little worried. We talked last year a lot, I remember, Erickson, I think mostly when we were talking about the Bears situation, but about how difficult it is for rookie quarterbacks to support more than one great fantasy receiver. And you say, it's a new quarterback coming in. It essentially is a rookie quarterback coming in, even though he's had a year to just sit with the system and, get to know Kevin O'Connell and these guys. It's essentially a rookie quarterback at the NFL level. Those guys often struggle to have multiple high-level fantasy receivers. We know Justin Jefferson is not going to be the guy who gets short shrift here. So I think this is a really fair one. Again, I kind of think the targets, receptions, and yards will be largely in the same range. I do think it'll be a lot of spike weeks and then a lot of nothing weeks to get to that point. And then it's just going to come down to the touchdowns again. Tom, what do you make of Addison?
Yeah, I think you're both making really good points on this one, because there's definitely a concern about what this offense is going to look like. I've got plenty of faith in Kevin O'Connell that he's going to get JJ McCarthy playing to a decent level. And I've got plenty of faith that Jordan Addison's stats aren't going to completely plummet. The 19 touchdowns in 2 seasons, touchdown production might not be sticky. We've talked about that already, and there's plenty written about that. But 19 touchdowns in 2 seasons is quite an impressive number. That's the 12th most through 2 seasons all time. Jamar Chase was only at 22. AJ Brown was only at 19. AJ Green was at 18. Julio Jones was at 18. These numbers are really strong and really impressive. If that regresses, can he make up for it in other ways? I'm not too sure, but I'm quite comfortable with Jordan Addison at this range in the draft. I don't really feel like I completely want to fade him. And part of that kind of comes down to the players who come after him. It feels like this is the edge of a tier break where the wide receivers coming after him, guys like Chris Olave, Juwan Jennings, George Pickens, Jacoby Myers, it feels like there are a lot of question marks around those players and the offenses they're on, maybe. And mixing in a guy like Jordan Addison, when I've got a fair idea of what he is as a player, what the Vikings are or could be as an offense, I'm okay with it. I don't really lean one way or the other strongly.
The other thing I want to just quickly mention on Addison is I have this image in my head of him getting a lot of kind of big play for a lot of those touchdowns specifically. And they drafted Ty Felton on day 2. And that, I think that was a bit of a reach on Felton, even though he's a Terp. But that is his best skill set, is the deep plays, in my opinion. So if some of those longer touchdowns and the big play touchdowns go to Felton, that will hurt Addison in that regard, as even aside from a healthy Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkins.
The Vikings, too, and I only remember this because of all my Aaron Jones anytime touchdown bets I made. They were one of the worst trying to convert at the goal line with the running backs. They were one of the worst teams offensively last year. So what happens when they didn't score a rushing touchdown? Oh, Jordan Addison finds the end zone yet again. So if Jordan Mason comes in and ends up being that banger in between the tackles, 3rd and 1, let's punch it in, okay, then you're seeing where the touchdowns aren't there for Addison in year 3.
Addison is one of those guys where I just like the player, so I do think I will have him in some leagues. And I honestly, if he's healthy, I feel similarly about the next guy who Tom just alluded to in his last bit talking about Addison. his final mid-round mistake here. I feel similarly where I just like the player, and I really want him to be good and get the usage I want to see, assuming he's healthy.
Yeah, I mean, it's Chris Olave, and definitely I would love to see a healthy and emphatic season from Chris Olave, but I just largely want to avoid the Saints this year, much like we kind of talked about with the Colts and my Jonathan Taylor pick. This is a team, the stink on the Saints is so bad. Like last year, the offensive line ranked 22nd in PFF grades, and I feel like it's going to be quite difficult for them to rate better. The quarterback situation is a complete nightmare, and I look back at the early part of the season when both Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed were healthy, and it was all Rashid Shaheed. Like, Shaheed had a 30% target share compared to Olave's 21%. Shaheed was the wide receiver 10 in that period compared to Olave being the wide receiver 46. Now, Shaheed's production was quite fluky. He ranked really highly in air yards per target, much higher in actual converted and realized air yards per target than most of the guys who rank high in that metric. So perhaps that comes back a little bit. But I think Rashid Shaheed is the real deal. I also like Juwan Johnson. I think that Alvin Kamara is going to see a ton of the ball. And I just don't think that Chris Olave, in this iteration of the Saints offense, is going to have enough upside where I want him on my team. I just think that he's going to be a floor player in 2025.
Erickson, what do you think of Olave? He's currently overall 60th in our half PPR rankings and wide receiver 29. Is that too high, too low, or just right?
I think it is way too high. I agree that Chris Olave is massively overvalued. I think at the point about Rashid Shaheed is not being talked about enough. Rashid Shaheed has not only outproduced Chris Olave last year, but it's been a trend. Like going back to since they've been playing together the last couple of years, their receiving yards per game aren't that far off. It's only Olave by about 10 yards. So Rashid Shaheed has been a very underrated player and looked like he was going to break out all over the place before he got hurt last year. So from an upside bet, right, because we always want to try to draft for upside, especially when it comes to some of these wide receivers, where's the upside case for Chris Olave? This guy doesn't create yards after the catch, which means he has to be reliant on accurate passes. Okay, you have Tyler Shuck coming in, 27-year-old I don't know how 26-year-old quarterback coming in as a rookie, and the upside is more attached to Shaheed, right? Why would I just take Rashid Shaheed later on after he outproduced Chris Olave last season? When you look at just top 12 weekly finishes over the past 2 seasons, Chris Olave has averaged 2 per year over the last 2 seasons. Rashid Shaheed has more top 12 weekly finishes than Chris Olave over the past 2 seasons. So when you're looking for upside, just wait and take Rashid Shaheed. It's the exact same bet you're making, except you're paying a fraction of the cost. So if you think that, hey, maybe the Saints can surprise, I'm a big Tyler Shuck guy, then I would just invest in Shaheed instead. And again, I'm not saying that that's going to be the case, that I want to be a Tyler Shuck person. I really don't want to draft any Saints either. But if I have to draft one, I'll just take Shaheed.
If you're tired of draft day uncertainty, the Cheat Sheet Creator is your personal guide to perfect league-specific rankings. Visualize your path to victory as you add tiers and sync your league to craft custom rankings, ensuring every pick is strategic and tailored to your league settings. Sync your league and enter your draft with confidence using the Cheat Sheet Creator at fantasypros.com/sheet or on the Fantasy Football Draft Wizard app. Guys, let's do one overhyped sleeper each. This is round 9 or later. We can go a little quicker on here because it's less really an overvalued guy and more just kind of a sleeper maybe that you're not totally buying into and are, it feels weird to say avoid when you're this late, but it's not a guy you're targeting as one of your later round sleepers. So we'll go a little quicker here. Erickson, who do you have?
Tyrone Tracy, running back for the New York Giants. I think when it's all said and done, I don't think he's going to be the starting running back for the New York Giants. So that's my concern about where he's ranked going ahead of Cam Skattebo. I get why you'd have him ranked ahead of Cam Skattebo, but Tyrone Tracy, if you look at him last year, it was kind of the tale of 2 seasons, right? When he first took over the job, he was very efficient, very explosive, but weeks 12 through 18, he was PFF's 4th worst graded rusher. He was splitting carries inside the 5-yard line with Devin Singletary. He had ball security issues, 3rd most fumbles among running backs. How many fumbles is it going to take for Brian Daboll to just be like, I'm sick of this guy, let's get Cam Skattebo in there, right? Every game the Giants play, they have to win for them to keep their jobs. And guys, spoiler, their schedule's really hard. So they can't afford turnovers and dumb mistakes by young players. So if I just think that his leash on the RB1 role is super, super loose. I just don't think that he has a vice grip on it. And when you look at the way that the Giants have orchestrated or have kind of created this backfield. You have Devin Singletary as a veteran presence. You have Tyrone Tracy. Tyrone Tracy seems like the complementary back to a starter like Cam Scadaboo, where Tyrone Tracy is the change of pace back, comes in as a burst of explosiveness, but Cam Scadaboo, we know he can play on all 3 downs. We know that we can catch passes out of the backfield. Even though Tyrone Tracy played wide receiver, it's still a little bit different when you're catching passes out of the backfield versus running routes from the slot or from out wide. So I think that Scadaboo is a legitimate threat. And there's only really, based on how we expect this Giants offense to be, probably not that good. Any type of workload that Tyrone Tracy is losing out to Cam Scadaboo, I think is going to hurt him a lot.
Any quick thoughts, Tom, on Tracy versus Scadaboo in that backfield?
Yeah, I'm just right there with Erickson. It just doesn't feel like a pick that I want to make. They seemed so hot and cold on him last year, and Devin Singletary's presence there. It'd be so much easier to take Tracy if Devin Singletary had been cut, but as it is, just give me Scadaboo instead.
Tom, who's your last player here?
Yeah, it's Jaydon Blue for the Cowboys, going currently about pick 130, and I've done this whole who else is going to get the touches argument before. It doesn't feel great. This is a guy who was a 5th round pick, 24th running back off the board of the draft, only had 1 college season over 400 yards. I just legitimately think that he could be a special teams only type player. Now, obviously, he's probably going to get touches in this offense because it is just Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders ahead of him. They have experience in things that actually matter to NFL offenses, and just penciling in a guy with very little college production into a starter role or into a meaningful role isn't something I want, particularly in managed leagues. And just give me guys like Trey Benson, Ray Davis, Rashad White, who are all going around him instead. I just do not want to make this bet at this price.
Deebo, our colleague, has been very in on this idea that Jaydon Blue, he doesn't hate Blue, but this idea that he's going to take over this backfield, even on passing downs, which is kind of, I think, the stereotype that people are thinking about for Blue, he's not a very good pass protector. I think, and we talked about this, Erickson, of course, on the running back ranking show that we just did earlier this week, where you, me, and Deebo are all, we're not over the moon about Javonte Williams, but we're all higher than consensus on him.
Well, he's this year's J.K. Dobbins.
Yes.
Tom, are you joining the lockstep with this call here? We have the next J.K. Dobbins with Javonte.
You can kind of drag me along at a slow J.K. Dobbins-like pace.
Well, I mean, I think you really kind of have to be in on him if you are fading Blue, because this is going to be a good offense. Maybe not an elite offense, but I think if Dak is healthy and CeeDee Lamb is healthy, it's going to be at the very least a good offense. And I think Miles Sanders couldn't be more washed. So if we think Blue is maybe a little bit overhyped too, somebody is going to get some valuable touches, and I think Javonte Williams has a better chance than the other 2 guys in this backfield. So I know we're not talking about Javonte, but I mean, it's kind of a counterpoint to, or it's kind of the other side of the coin of fading Jaydon Blue.
Yeah, I would agree with Jaydon Blue being maybe a little overvalued. I think that we love how he's explosive and he can catch passes out of the backfield, but that doesn't mean he's going to get goal line touches. That doesn't mean he's going to catch all the dump offs from Dak Prescott. But yes, he'll look great running a wheel route from Dak Prescott, and then he won't play any more snaps in the game. That's the issue with Jaydon Blue is, I think, let's say Javonte flops. I don't think they're going to be all right, let's load Jaydon Blue up with 20 carries. I think it's just going to be hey, who's going to be the next innings eater? Miles Sanders, get in there. Just take carries. So Jaydon Blue, I agree, is going to look explosive in this offense and thinks he can rip off big plays, but is that going to be predictive of, okay, now you feel good about starting Jaydon Blue? Oh, we got 5 touches the next week. So that's the concern, is that he's just a compliment to which one of these guys. So I think if Javonte hits, I think he's probably a bigger win than if Jaydon Blue is just kind of used seldomly based on the fact that he also has fumble security issues as well. Pass pro, like you said, Worm. So yeah, I think that Jaydon Blue probably a little bit overvalued as well.
To that point, we're saying that he's overvalued in the rankings. His ADP is 30 spots higher than where he's currently ranked in ECR. So he's already, and that there's a lot of room for that to change, obviously, between now and the end of August, but he's already going well ahead of where the experts are ranking him, and we're even saying that the experts are maybe ranking him a bit too high. So definitely be at least thinking about that if you are targeting him as a sleeper in your redraft leagues. We'll go ahead and wrap up there because it's super late for Tom right now. Tom, thanks for staying up late with us, a little FP After Dark, at least from your perspective. For Tom and Erickson, I'm Ryan Wormeli. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you again next time.